She didn't look up when they left her there. The hide flap whispered shut behind the last elder, sealing her into a space that smelled of fire, dust, and unfamiliar lives. The lodge fell into silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that pressed on your chest like a stone. Only the low crackle of the fire remained, flickering shadows across the curved walls. May sat on the edge of what passed for a bed, soft pelt spread carefully over a woven mat. Her body trembled, not from cold but from something deeper. Her hands, cracked from wind and travel, clenched together in her lap. She was still in the rough gray dress they'd given her at the outpost, the one-size-fits-all kind meant for prisoners or orphans. Her own dress had been burned, along with the wagon, the horses, and her father. She hadn't cried in hours. There was nothing left to cry. Just the hollow ache of being traded. Outside, the drums had stopped. The marriage feast, as they called it, had ended. There had been no vows, no smiles, no blessing, just the tight faces of men agreeing to a bargain. A settler girl, offered up to an Apache warrior as a peace bond after a winter soaked in blood. "Don't fight it," the magistrate had told her. "You're young, you'll survive." But survival wasn't the same as living. Her shoes were still on, mud-crusted, stiff, barely holding their shape. She didn't dare take them off. She didn't dare move at all. Then he entered. The warrior, her husband, the man no one had introduced her to. He stepped into the firelight without sound, like snow falling. He was tall, broad-shouldered, younger than she expected. No war paint, no scars. His hair was long and black, tied back neatly, a strip of red leather circling his brow. His eyes were dark and unreadable. He didn't speak, just paused by the entrance, watching her. Not her body, not with desire, but with a gaze that saw something, and asked nothing. She broke first. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know I'm not what you wanted. I know I'm not—" Her voice caught. "I'm not pretty." He didn't move, didn't answer. Then, softly, almost imperceptibly, he knelt, not to reach for her, not to demand anything, but to untie her shoes. Her breath caught as his fingers, careful and reverent, worked the stiff leather knots. The shoes came away with a dry crack. Her bare feet, red, blistered, dirt-caked, trembled in the firelight. Still wordless, he dipped a cloth into a bowl of warm water and began to wash her feet, gently, as if she were made of silk. He didn't look up, didn't expect thanks, didn't reach beyond that simple act. And May, silent, stunned, stared down at the damp footprint her foot had left behind, unsure whether it was shame or something stranger curling in her chest. Because no one had ever done this for her. No one had ever made her feel sacred. May didn't sleep that night. The furs beneath her were soft, but her thoughts had sharp edges. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind circled back to the man who had knelt in silence and washed the blood from her feet. He hadn't spoken, hadn't touched her again, hadn't even looked at her after that. He'd simply added more wood to the fire and laid a second blanket on the far side of the lodge, close enough she could hear his breath, far enough not to touch her space. He hadn't claimed her. He hadn't even explained himself. And somehow, that made her more afraid. Morning came pale and cold. She sat still, uncertain whether she was supposed to stay put or follow someone. But no one came for her. Not until a girl about her age entered quietly, Apache, with soft eyes and a long braid. She carried a folded garment made of soft deerskin and set it beside May without a word, only offering a small nod toward her outpost dress. May's fingers trembled as they touched the fabric. It was warm, worn in, but beautiful in its own way. It smelled of earth and smoke and something ancient. She held it close but didn't change. Not yet. "Do I have to wear this?" she asked, barely above a whisper. The girl didn't answer, just smiled gently and left. Later that day he returned, Nantan, though she still hadn't spoken his name aloud. He carried a wooden bowl with something steaming, beans, squash, herbs. He placed it in front of her and sat across the fire. She stared at him. At his hands, his face, his eyes. He didn't look angry. He didn't look pleased either. Just present. Steady. It made her feel like she was unraveling from the inside. She took a bite. Her stomach clenched as she swallowed. She hadn't eaten in over a day, but now the food felt heavy. Not because it wasn't good, but because his eyes were on her, and she didn't know how to carry that weight. Finally she broke. "You don't want me here, do you?" Her voice cracked. "This wasn't your choice." Still, he said nothing, but he didn't look away. Instead, he reached into the leather pouch at his belt and pulled something out. A necklace, simple, beautiful, strung with small carved stones. He placed it carefully into her hand. "My sister wore this before her wedding," he said, voice low and quiet. "She died last winter." May looked down at the necklace. The stones were warm from his body, painted with tiny patterns she couldn't name. "Why give it to me?" she whispered. "You don't even know me." He met her eyes. "Not yet." And then he rose and stepped outside, leaving her alone with the necklace in her palm and a strange hollow ache in her chest. She sat in silence, staring at the stones. It wasn't rejection. It wasn't acceptance. It was something in between, like a door slightly ajar. And for the first time since arriving, May realized what scared her most wasn't being hated. It was being unseen. 3 mornings later, May woke to a sound outside the lodge. Soft voices, the shuffle of feet, the low murmur of women speaking in a language she still didn't understand. When she peeked through the hide flap, she saw a small group gathered in the clearing, carrying bundles of red cloth, feathers, and sprigs of flowers. Nantan was nowhere in sight. Before she could retreat, the braided girl returned, not with clothes this time, but with purpose. She motioned for May to come, her hand extended, but not forceful. "Just waiting." May hesitated. She wasn't sure what she was agreeing to. She didn't know the rules, the customs, or what might happen if she got it wrong. But the girl's gaze held no threat, only calm. So May stood. She followed. They walked through the village together, past low huts, drifting smoke, elders with eyes like bark, and children who paused in their play to stare. May felt every glance like a thread pulling at her skin, as if she were being stitched into something too big to comprehend. The women led her to the river's edge, where the earth smelled wet and clean. No words were spoken. One handed her a bowl filled with fragrant green water. Another combed her hair with slow, gentle fingers. A third painted a line down the part of her scalp with red clay and oil. May sat perfectly still. Her breath shallow. She didn't understand what was happening until someone unfolded a dress. Not a labor dress, not a sleeping shift. This one was crimson, hand-stitched with bone-colored thread. Ceremonial. "Why?" she murmured, almost afraid to speak aloud. "Why are you dressing me like this?" Again, no words, only hands, warm and steady, helping her into the garment. And that was when she understood. This was not a performance, not a treaty. This was a wedding, a real one, on their terms. Her throat burned with something sharp, not pain, not even sadness, something more dangerous, hope. And it broke her open. By the time they walked her back through the village, her cheeks were wet. No one mocked her for crying. No one turned away. The women simply walked with her, their steps a silent rhythm of solidarity. At the lodge, Nantan was waiting, freshly washed, dressed in soft buckskin that clung to him like second skin. His long hair was tied back with red string. He didn't stare. He didn't smirk. He just bowed his head when he saw her, as if to say, "I know this moment is heavy for you." The elders were gathered. One of them spoke slowly in Apache, voice deep and rhythmic. Between May and Nantan, he placed a carved wooden staff on the ground. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the gesture. "Step across, and you're both part of this now." She stood there, heart pounding, breath shallow. Then she stepped. Her bare feet touched the earth, trembling. Nantan reached for her hands, gently, not to possess, but to steady. When the elder finished speaking, no one clapped, no one shouted. There were only murmurs of approval, soft as wind in leaves. But May felt it like thunder. She wasn't just being accepted. She was being invited in. That night, May didn't cry. She sat on the same bed of pelts, the ceremonial dress still clinging softly to her skin, her breath shallow but steady. The silence between her and Nantan wasn't sharp anymore. It had softened, like coals after flame. Again, he knelt before her. He didn't speak, just reached for her feet, dusted from her walk through the village. With careful hands, he untied the leather cords and wiped her soles clean. Not because she was dirty, not because she belonged to him, but because he wanted her to rest. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she didn't feel ugly. The next morning, she woke to the low hum of life outside, the thud of feet, the laughter of children, the clatter of bowls. She dressed in the ceremonial garment again, not because she had to, but because she wasn't ready to shed it. She liked how it made her feel, solid, seen. Nantan had already gone. He left no note, no orders, only a small bundle near the hearth, corn cakes, a strip of dried meat, and something wrapped in hide. May opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny carved comb, delicate, too small to belong to him. Maybe it had been his sister's, or his mother's, but now it was hers. She ran it through her hair slowly, reverently. That day she did little. Swept the lodge floor, rinsed a blanket in the stream, helped a child gather a fallen toy. Each moment was small, ordinary, but to her they felt like stepping stones across a vast river. When the sun reached its highest point, the tall, older woman appeared. Her presence was like stone, quiet but undeniable. She stepped into the lodge without knocking, her long layers of sand-colored cloth rustling faintly. Her face was lined but regal, eyes dark and steady. "I am Nasha," she said. May stood straighter. I live with Nantan. You eat our food. You sleep beneath our roof," Nasha replied, her tone not unkind. "But you do not yet walk among us." May's throat tightened. The words were true, painfully so. "I don't know what I'm allowed to do," she admitted, "or who I am here." Nasha didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled something from the pouch at her hip, a loop of beads, warm from the sun, earth-colored, soft to the touch. She held it out. "Tomorrow, you sit in the circle with the women, if you choose." May hesitated. "Will they ask me to speak?" "No one will ask. But if you stay silent too long," Nasha said, her voice quiet now, "your heart will dry." Then she turned and left. May stared down at the beads in her palm. She didn't know what the circle meant, or what they expected of her, but she knew one thing clearly. This wasn't an order. It was an invitation. That night, when Nantan returned with a fresh rabbit slung over one shoulder, May showed him the comb. "Thank you," she said. "It's beautiful." He smiled. Barely, but it was real. "It was my mother's," he said. Then, after a breath, "Now it's yours." May clutched the comb tightly, and for the first time, the word home didn't feel like something behind her. It felt like something waiting ahead. The morning sun was soft, less a command to rise than a whisper to begin. May stood at the edge of the village, fingers curled around the beaded loop Nasha had given her. It felt heavier than it should, not from weight, but from meaning. Her heart pounded, not from fear of rejection, but from the deeper fear of being seen, and not measuring up. Nantan had left at first light. "West Trail," he'd said. 2 days. No explanation, no promises, just a look that said, "It's yours to choose now." So she followed the scent of simmering maize and the faint sound of laughter toward the trees at the eastern edge of the village, where the women gathered in a wide, shaded circle. They didn't look up when she arrived, but they felt her. The silence around the group shifted, subtle, like wind bending around a stone. May hovered at the edge, unsure how to enter. Her feet refused to move. Then a girl, maybe 5, stood and walked to her. No hesitation, no words, just a hand reaching out, warm and small. May took it, and the circle opened. No one asked her name, no one asked her to explain herself. They simply made room, on the mat, in their rhythm, in their world. She sat cross-legged, awkward at first, surrounded by hands that twisted fibers, strung beads, pounded herbs. Tiva was there, eyes curious, always watching. Nasha quiet and steady. Others whose names she didn't know, but whose gestures spoke of welcome. One woman handed May a spindle of thread, another placed a small bowl of dried petals beside her. It wasn't ceremony, it was inclusion. May's fingers fumbled at first, too used to settler stitches and cotton mending. But slowly, she found her rhythm, spinning, twisting, weaving. She remembered braiding her mother's hair, sewing her own hem when it tore on a nail. Small things, forgotten things, but hers. "I'm Tiva," came a soft voice beside her. May glanced over. The younger woman's face was calm, but her eyes sharp as a blade wrapped in silk. "May," she whispered back. Tiva nodded once. "Your husband, he is not unkind." May blinked. "He's not." "That helps," Tiva said simply. She reached into a basket and pulled out a folded length of dyed fabric, soft ochre, stitched along the hem. "You don't have to wear our dresses," she said, "but you shouldn't wear white here. It scares the little ones." May looked down at her shift. Once pale, now stained and tired, she hadn't thought of what it might represent. She accepted the fabric carefully. "Thank you." Tiva shrugged, but there was gentleness in the motion. "You can sew." "Good. We'll teach you the rest." Time blurred. Laughter rose like birdsong. At one point, a baby was handed to May, with no explanation. Her heart jumped, her arms uncertain. But the child curled into her chest like he belonged there, and she didn't let go. By the time the sun began to slide west, Nasha stood and looked directly at her. "Come again tomorrow," she said, as if it had already been decided. May nodded, throat tight. She walked back to the lodge with the bundle of fabric in her arms and the baby's warmth still clinging to her. She hadn't thought about being traded once that day. Not once. And that, she realized, was something sacred. That night, sleep didn't come easily. May lay on her side beneath the pelts. The fabric Tiva had given her folded near her head, like a promise she didn't yet know how to accept. Outside, the lodge was still, the stars distant and cold. Nantan hadn't returned. 3 days now. She hadn't realized how used she'd grown to his quiet presence. The soft clink of his belt when he walked in, the way he always stirred the fire before sleep, the faint warmth of his body across the room. Now, the lodge felt emptier. Not abandoned, just waiting. That evening, Tiva came with her child. She sat by the fire without knocking, her eyes shadowed. "There's talk," she said quietly. "The hunting party is late, Nantan with them." May's breath caught. "Late." Tiva nodded, bouncing the baby gently. "No one says the word. But the women..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. That night the fire died too quickly. May wrapped herself tighter, but it wasn't the cold that unsettled her. It was the silence. Not absence, but dread. The kind that sits behind your ribs and waits. When the lodge grew too dark to stay, she stood and stepped outside. No one stopped her. No one needed to. She walked past sleeping fires, through moonlight and frost toward the trees. The forest loomed black and silver. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay still. Her boots crunched over frozen dirt, her breath fogged in front of her. She whispered into the wind, "You said you'd come back." No answer. Then, hoofbeats. She turned. A shape moved between the trees, broad, snow-dusted, familiar. Nantan. He rode alone, braid unraveled, a cut above his brow. His eyes found hers immediately. She didn't run, not yet. She waited as he dismounted and walked the last few steps toward her. "You're late," she said, her voice barely holding steady. "Yes," he answered. "You're bleeding. Only where it doesn't matter." She exhaled shakily. "You said you'd come back." "I did." And then, so gently it nearly broke her, he reached into the pouch at his side and pulled out a bundle wrapped in hide. He opened it slowly, revealing a pair of soft deerskin shoes, stitched with small sunburst patterns. May gasped. "You made these?" "Not me," he said. "My sister. I asked her to make them, for someone who walks beside me, not behind." He knelt, not with ceremony but with care. He removed her boot, peeling away the damp worn sock. Her foot was cold, cracked, vulnerable. He didn't flinch. He slid the new shoe on gently. Then the other. She stared down, stunned. "You're barefoot," she whispered. "I walked with them in my coat," he replied. "You needed them more." Something in her chest cracked wide open, not pain, not fear. Something warm, something terrifying. "Nantan," she breathed. "You don't have to say anything." He looked up at her. "But I will," he said. "I see you, May. Not as a burden, not as a trade. You are the woman I would build a roof for twice." Her throat tightened. She laughed, a strange broken sound. She stepped forward until the tips of their shoes touched. "Then let's build it," she said softly. "Together." Dawn crept slowly over the village, soft and gray, curling around smoke from early cook fires and the patter of children's feet chasing chickens. The world hadn't changed, but May had. And somehow, the world felt it. She stood beside Nantan at the central fire, where the elders gathered once each moon to speak of land, spirit, and survival. This time, though, their circle was smaller. Tiva stood to the side with her child bundled against her chest. 2 old men, faces lined like riverbeds, sat beneath heavy robes of buffalo hide. Nantan hadn't told her much. Only, "It matters that you stand beside me," so she did. Her hands shook only once, and then went still. When the oldest among them, Sika, lifted his hand, the fire popped. "We see you," he said, his voice like dry leaves in wind. His eyes fixed on May. "But how do you see yourself?" She swallowed hard. The silence stretched long, the fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance a hawk cried. May stepped forward, heart pounding against her ribs. "I was given," she began, "traded like a bag of grain for peace. I came here afraid. Angry. I thought I was. What was left over, what wasn't worth keeping. No one flinched, but your women gave me warmth. Your children gave me laughter." She turned her head, found Nantan's eyes. His face was unreadable, but steady. "And he gave me time." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "I know I'm not Apache. I know I came from a place that doesn't understand this one. But I want to. If you'll let me, I want to stay." Not as a symbol, not as a payment, but as someone who chooses this. The hush that followed wasn't silence, it was weight. Then the younger elder leaned forward, voice clear. Dome, he said. Belonging. A ripple of agreement moved through the circle. Nods, murmurs, the soft clack of a carved stick hitting earth. Sika's gaze did not soften, but his tone did. Then you are no longer guest, no longer burden. You are part of the fire now. Keep it well. May's knees nearly buckled, not from fear, but from release. Nantan stepped forward, his hand settling over her shoulder. Warm, grounding. You spoke truth, he whispered. They respect that more than blood. That evening, the village gathered not for a council but a feast. Someone brought out a drum. Someone else brought laughter. The women passed roasted maize and fresh berries. Children chased each other between shadows. May found herself beside the fire, not outside of it. Nantan carved meat from a spit and handed her the first piece. Not with ceremony, just because. She took it. Later, when the stars pierced the sky like quiet promises, they sat side by side on the same rock they once passed in silence. I'm glad you stayed, he said. So am I, she whispered, leaning into his shoulder. The fire glowed low, the drum slowed. May didn't fear the dark anymore. She had stepped through it, and found herself not just whole, but home. May woke to birdsong and the scent of juniper smoke drifting through the seams of the lodge. Her body felt still, but her heart beat like she had run a long way and finally arrived somewhere she could rest. The blanket that covered her still held the faint scent of Nantan, smoke, leather, something quietly warm. She drew it tighter for a moment before rising. Outside, the village moved gently. Women carried water in clay pots. Children ran barefoot, their laughter weaving through drying racks and baskets of beans. Old men sat near the fires, stretching toward the morning sun with reverent slowness. No one stared, no one whispered. For the first time since arriving, May understood something simple and profound. They saw her, not as an outsider, not as a girl who had been given, not even as Nantan's wife. They saw her as May. She spotted Nantan near the horses, speaking softly to a young boy. When he saw her, he didn't call out or make a gesture. He simply smiled, small, but real. She walked to him and took the reins from his hand without asking, and he didn't stop her. That evening, Tiva came to her with a bundle wrapped in cloth. This was mine, she said, before my daughter grew. Inside was a dress, soft deerskin, beadwork sewn in curved, patient lines. May hesitated to touch it. You don't have to wear it, Tiva added. But it would be good if you did. May nodded slowly. That night, the village gathered again, not for council or for mourning, but for celebration. Not of a wedding with veils and vows, but of presence, of community, of quiet belonging. There was no priest, no ring, only a circle of people she had learned to love, and who had, in their own way, chosen her back. When she stepped to the fire, Nantan was waiting, not with a question, but with calm certainty. She stepped beside him, palm to palm. It was enough. A small child tied a single red thread around their wrists, a custom of unity. The elders watched, their eyes full of storms and seasons, and no one needed to speak. Later that night, after the fire had softened to warm coals, Nantan brought a basin of water into the lodge. He knelt before her again, not to claim, not to comfort, but to honor. As he washed her feet, slow, reverent, May leaned down, cupped his face in her hands, and whispered, I see you now. He smiled, looking up, and I see you. No cheers followed, no need. The silence was blessing enough. From far off, a coyote howled. The earth turned on, wild and indifferent. But in this small lodge, in this small moment, May felt the world pause. She had once sat on a wedding bed crying. Tonight she stood chosen. Not because she was beautiful, not because she had been fixed, but because she was finally seen. And in that seeing, she was loved.